I would like to call to order the regular board meeting of Tuesday, February 21st, 2023. As is our custom, we begin our board meetings with the singing of our national anthem. We are very honored today to have students from Willow Park School lead us in the singing of Canada. I would ask everyone to please stand and follow the lead of the students.
Good morning, all. First of all, we'd like to thank Director Weipert for giving us this opportunity to present to you today. My name is Dean Marklinger, and this is my partner, Robin Phillips, and we are the very proud administrators of Willow Park School, a CBE alternative arts-centered learning program serving all of South Calgary. To get us started, we'd like to introduce 3 grade 8 students from our school, Coralie and Ofri, who will be singing O Canada, accompanied by Dalton on guitar. Thank you, Coralie, Ofri, and Dalton for that beautiful performance. I must also give a little shout out to Coralie, who came this morning on a WestJet plane from Vancouver at 3 a.m. and got here despite the weather and everything else. We would now like to welcome River, who will provide the acknowledgement of the land.
We are honored to provide the acknowledgement of the land for today's meeting. As a school community, we continue to think and rethink about the ways in which we can hold true to our commitments in support of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action. Our school community supports the TRC through continuing to build connections between Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists and art experiences, with a focus on building student capacity for intercultural understanding, empathy, and mutual respect. We strive to build our collective capacity and find the intersections between these commitments and our work as an art-centered learning environment. We are a community of artists, and the arts are the entry point into interacting and understanding the world. We look deeply at the works and styles of a wide range of Indigenous artists and seek to center them in our collective learning. We strive to not only look at the art created by Indigenous artists, but to look at the messages in it, to help us increase our student capacity for intercultural understanding. The Holistic Lifelong Learning Framework is our guide. This picture shares the collective work of our school. We moved through the HLLF and linked a specific Indigenous artist and artistic style to each quadrant. With each new artist we encountered, there was a prompt for students to reflect on and connect with the elements of that quadrant. For example, when we took up The Heart to Belong, our learning was anchored by Christy Belcourt and her piece, My Heart is Beautiful. We listened to Belcourt speak of her connections to plants and the land, and we did the same. sharing stories of our connections to place, anchored by a plant that carries significance for us. We then created our own artwork to build on this school-wide visual anchor. The same process was followed as we moved around the circle. We are proud of how we have worked together to stay focused and dedicated to our call to action. We know there is more to be done. We know there is always more to learn and more to listen to. Our elders have shared that it is important to acknowledge the land where we gather and the first peoples who traditionally lived here. It shows respect for the people, their contributions, and their ways of knowing, which are reflected through stories and songs that have lived on this land for thousands of years. We are making this acknowledgement at the beginning of our gathering today to further demonstrate our commitment to work together as a community in laying down the foundation for reconciliation through education. We would like to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Blackfoot Nations, which includes the Siksika, the Biganai, and the Kainai. We also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all the people who make their homes in Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta.
There's more of the agenda. Trustee Close, as ward trustee for Willow Park School, would you like to say a few words?
I would, and proudly, but not half as eloquently. So I'm going to start with River. Thank you so much for coming up and sharing such a beautiful introduction to a land acknowledgement that is personalized and reflects the culture and belonging of Willow Park School. So what grabbed me when you were speaking and I wrote down was the heart to belong. That's always going to grab me, so anybody wants to know that. But also the collective and the community and the connections that we make with one another. So thank you for that and starting us off in a good way. Coralie, Ofri, and Dalton, it's not always easy to come up and stand in the center of a circle and sing O Canada and play guitar so beautifully, but thank you so much. Sometimes some of us try to sing O Canada when we sing O Canada, but we left it to you because the beauty of your voices was remarkable. But thank you so much for sharing the stories and the song and bringing meaning to the start of our board meeting, and looking forward to the presentation from Willow Park School as well. But thank you on behalf of all of us. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of our staff and public in attendance at this meeting. Our first item of business is to approve the agenda for today's meeting. Ms. Miner, do you have any changes that need to be noted?
Madam Chair, the following agenda change request has been received: that item 9.2.1, the Chief Superintendent's Update Report, be removed from the consent agenda and added as item 7.1 under matters reserved for board information.
Could I have a motion that the agenda be approved with the proposed changes? Thank you, Trustee Bolger. Those in favor of the motion? Trustee Downey?
In favor.
That is carried unanimously. Next business deals with results focus. Today we have a school presentation from Willow Park School. Director Weipert, would you please introduce the presentation?
Thank you. For those who don't know me, I'm Ken Weipert, Education Director in Area 5 with the CBE. So Willow Park School is situated in the community of Willow Park in southeast Calgary and offers students in grades 5 through 9 an opportunity to learn in and through the arts. Students take courses in art, drama, dance, music, and media arts to learn the foundation of each of these disciplines. The distinguishing feature of an art-centered learning program is the focus in core curriculum on learning and teaching using the arts as a means of understanding the world. Students are given opportunities to learn and present information and experiences in multiple ways. A component of this is the dedication of an hour and a half every week to offering an art core experience. This art core experience time provides staff and students time to teach and learn art skills for a specific purpose, which students, as artists of their own, can choose from, combine, alter, and use when learning in and through the arts. So it gives me great pleasure to turn this back over to Dean and Robin, who will introduce the video that speaks to OE2. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I have Nathan, who's going to be joining us today, and Nathan's going to introduce our video, because really this is a show and tell. We got to show you what we're all about, and Nathan's going to lead us off. So thank you, Nathan.
Hello. Max is not going to be joining us today, but my name is Nathan, and I'm a grade 9 student at Willow Park. We are pleased to share with you today a video that showcases our school. At Willow Park, we believe the arts are a landscape where academic success is possible for all students. At the end of the video, you will see a recorded presentation of a project by my friend Max and I. It is spoken word poetry written by Max and original musical composition by me. Thank you.
Willow Park School is an art-centered learning alternative middle school program serving students from South Calgary in grades 5 to 9. At Willow Park School, we believe the arts are a landscape where academic success for all students is possible. We know that access to art-centered learning allows for excellence in student achievement and promotes well-being for our students now and later in life.
Art-centered learning at Willow Park focuses on learning in and through the arts. Students take courses in art, drama, dance, music, and media arts to learn the foundations of these disciplines and ways to incorporate skills and concepts into our core subjects. In core subjects like math, science, social studies, and English language arts, we can use the arts as a means of understanding the world.
We see ourselves as a community of people who think as artists. We encourage students to embody the understanding of their learning through various mediums that allow them to be curious, imaginative, and inventive. Our school allows students to find inspiration in the world around them with visual, performing, and digital lenses, which are leveraged by the Calgary Board of Education system-wide strategies for student achievement and well-being. Students learn through experimentation, trial and error, success and failure. They reflect on their work and revise and refine it over time. We are a community that takes creative risks, makes artistic decisions, and builds confidence with agency and freedom.
At Willow Park, our creative and compassionate teachers support students to achieve at individually and appropriately challenging levels of complexity, demonstrating higher order thinking skills of knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and creativity in all disciplines. Elliot Eisner contends that the arts develop dispositions and habits of mind that reveal to the individual a world that he or she may not have noticed, but that is there to be seen if only one knew how to look. Works of art provide students with an inexhaustible resource for learning, through which they can engage the aesthetic dispositions of noticing deeply, embodying, igniting wonder, identifying patterns and making connections, engaging in empathy, taking creative risks, living with possibility, creating meaning, reflecting, revising and refining, and a transformative action.
Through the dispositions, students experience curiosity and wonder about the world and their place in it. Students find patterns and solve problems by thinking abstractly and systematically. When they are engaged with the work of art in various disciplines, they think creatively, strategically process ideas using investigation and interpretation. Students examine social constructs such as race, ethnicity, class, and community, and explore how culture and societies change. They understand change, tell stories, explore memory, and seek truth. When students engage with a work of art, their curiosity is heightened, their imagination ignited, and their preconceived notions challenged, leading to academic success for all.
At our school, we are, as Maxine Green offers, interested in education, not in schooling. We are interested in openings, in unexplored possibilities, not the predictable or the quantifiable, not in what is thought of as social control. For us, education signifies an initiation into new ways of seeing, hearing, feeling, moving. It signifies the nurture of a special kind of reflectiveness and expressiveness, a reaching out for meanings, a learning to learn. The arts promote student wellness by making students feel more engaged and resilient, therefore boosting self-confidence. The arts are an effective tool for mindfulness and managing mental health. Specifically, engaging with visual art has been found to activate different parts of the brain other than those taxed by logical, linear thinking. But most importantly, the arts allow and teach self-compassion. Art-centered learning allows for flexibility, adaptability, and awareness of self and others. It allows not only for students to find inspiration in the world around them, but with their persistence and practice, it allows students to honor their self-worth and trust in their instincts and decision-making abilities. It allows for students to engage in transformative learning, understanding that who they are as artists and as individuals changes and evolves over time and with experience. The arts allows students to cultivate and grow while developing one's own craft, developing an understanding of self, others, and the world with self-expression, but most of all, finding inspiration, academic success, and worth with and in the place that counts the most, themselves.
Hi, I'm Max.
And I'm Nathan.
This is the poem about family. Family is a word which holds strong meaning. Just like love, hate, and jealousy, though family cannot be described with emotion. You can love your family, you can hate your family, but how can one describe family? Family is but a concept, but everyone knows the meaning. Some say family is blood, some say it's the ones who raised you. Some say it's who you love, some say it's who you spend your days with. They're all correct. Family is not about blood, but the people you consider yours. The people that care about you, the people you care about. The ones you nurture and the ones you trust. Family is about people who love each other, which is why family and love go hand in hand. Hand in hand like a father and a daughter, hand in hand like lovers, hand in hand like siblings, hand in hand not bonded by blood, but by connection of heart and soul. That is family.
So just to close up, I wanted to mention that Max and Nathan's performance was a reading response assignment tied to Cherie Demoline's book, The Marrow Thieves, where they explored, the themes of family and the many ways in which we define it. We hope that through our visuals and our narratives that you were able to see the very beautiful way that we work to achieve academic success at Willow Park. We thank you for your time.
Trustee Close, as ward trustee for Willow Park School, would you like to say some additional words?
I would, and I believe we're probably all very moved and and grateful for you bringing and sharing the essence of Willow Park School. I know I want to be invited to anything just to come and witness it in person, but I'm sure we all would. Nathan, thank Max for us. And thank you for that collaboration. It was a beautiful representation of learning. I think what strikes me and strikes all of us is the importance of making meaning, participating in meaning, sharing meaning, and you demonstrated that so beautifully in the spoken word on family, but also the whole video showcased the excellent work that Willow Park does to find students and share with students the importance of learning through the arts. So thank you, and thank you for starting us off today when we talk about the importance of academic success for all students in the Calgary Board of Education. Really, really appreciated your presentation today. Thank you.
Next on our agenda is the annual monitoring of operational expectations 3 instructional program. Chief Usi, would you please introduce the report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, trustees. Before I do so, I just also like to echo those thanks as well to students and staff at Willow Park School. So thank you very much. Congratulations. Today, trustees, we present the monitoring report for Operational Expectation 3 instructional program. The data collected for this monitoring report applies to the 2021-2022 school year. While the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic continued to impact both instructional programming as well as staff and student absenteeism, I'm pleased to report that the Calgary Board of Education continued to provide high-quality programming for our students. This is thanks to the ongoing efforts of teachers, principals, school staff, our support units, and administration, as is reflected in the monitoring report before the board today. The evidence presented in this report indicates compliance with 10 of the 11 indicators. The program evaluations were in progress for the 2021-22 school year. An annual report of completed program evaluations was not provided to the Board of Trustees at that time. As a result, compliance with indicator 3.2.1 was not met for the purpose of this monitoring report before the board. At this time, I'll turn it over to our Superintendent of School Improvement to provide further highlights and context to this report. And Madam Chair will be happy to answer questions from trustees subsequent to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Superintendent Usi. Chair Hack and trustees. Each year, schools complete a school development plan, which states the students' goals, instructional actions, resources, key outcomes, measures, and data for each of our measures. Schools review data from the previous year to determine the learning needs of their students in the context of the teacher's ability to address these needs. Education directors review school development plans, complete regular school visits, and provide feedback that supports continuous improvement. As a follow-up to Chief Usi's introduction, I would offer a few key highlights from this report stemming from the review of school development plans, a recurring and overarching theme of staff calibration and collaboration. At all levels of the organization, this theme was evident in the work undertaken by schools across areas and supported by administration and service units. The use of CBE developed frameworks and resources, including the literacy, mathematics, and Indigenous education holistic lifelong learning frameworks, along with the assessment and reporting guide and understanding grade level writing guide, provided foundational understanding and calibration for task design, assessment, and creating spaces for learning, which was highlighted in the school development plans. Prior to the 2020-2021 school year, schools were permitted to use only one local measure, report cards. Beginning in 2020-21, schools were no longer restricted to this one local measure. Rather, schools were asked to consider how would they know that there had been improvement and what specific data would tell them if this was the case. By removing the limit on the types of local measures schools could use, the examination of incremental progress was able to occur. Staff collaboration and calibration around the local development and use of such literacy and numeracy assessment to measure incremental progress, and the use of provincial diagnostic tools to provide a consistent baseline for student learning was another consistent theme in school development plans for the 2021-22 school year. System and area learning resources also continue to support student development, achievement, and wellness. One example highlighted in this report was the area learning team process and referrals, which were utilized by 100% of school principals, with the most commonly requested support being for psychoeducational assessments to support student learning. Other requests that highlight the diversity of supports for students included requests for school family liaisons, social, behavior, and mental health psychologists, and diversity and learning support advisors. At this point, I will turn to Superintendent Pittman to share highlights regarding student learning opportunities and supports.
Chair Hack and trustees, as a system, the Calgary Board of Education continues to provide multiple opportunities, as was just evidenced prior to the start of this report, where students have access to many opportunities as their age and grade level increase and through their developmental ability. One highlight from this report that demonstrates this commitment is in the work of our career and technology studies specifically. CBE continued to provide multiple opportunities in 5 occupational clusters in high schools across the city. While programming in each cluster was not available in each individual high school, as a system, CBE collectively prioritizes the offerings of choice and exploration in each and access to such. A second highlight would be the Unique Pathways programming, which includes our exploratory as well as our dual credit programming. While our dual credit programs and cohorts did experience a 25% reduction in the 21-22 school year, this was primarily due to our inability to offer programs relative to the holdover of the COVID-19 pandemic and uncertainty for some of our post-secondaries in the delivery of their actual programs. However, despite that, our overall Unique Pathways enrollment still increased by over 7%. At this point, we welcome any questions you have regarding the report.
The operational expectations policies define the degree of authority transferred to the Chief Superintendent as he makes day-to-day decisions. The Board of Trustees has previously reviewed the reasonable interpretations of this operational expectation and approved that the Chief Superintendent reasonably understands the values underlying this policy, and that the indicators previously provided by the Chief Superintendent are acceptable to the Board. I now invite any trustee who has any questions about the report to offer them to the Chief Superintendent. Let me remind the Board that the purpose of considering this report is to satisfy the Board that its policy values were complied with during the 2021-2022 school year. I encourage trustees to limit their questions and comments in support of monitoring. Trustee Bolger.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So this is related to OE 3.4. So with the area learning teams, it's excellent to see that 100% of our principals accessing services for students through the area learning teams. And given the increased complexity of needs and enrollment of students in our schools, is our staffing complement in this area sufficient to support student achievement and wellness?
Through the chair, I can assure you that we do have a sufficient breadth of expertise at the system level in order to provide support and services for the diversity of students we serve. So we have quite a cadre of professionals that support this work. That includes psychologists, behavior support workers, social workers, strategists, specialists, learning leaders, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and those that support students that are blind, visually impaired, or deaf, or hard of hearing. So at the school level, there are staff with expertise that work alongside students with diverse needs to support their daily learning, social, emotional, mental health, or physical needs. While we have prioritized hiring specialized personnel within our system, and that is at both the school and centralized levels, the complexity and number of students with diverse needs is indeed growing. So the ALT process allows us to consider ongoing review of student needs across the system that then allow us to ensure that student needs are best allocated according to what each individual student need has.
Trustee Dennis?
Thank you. So my first question is related to information found on page 7-24 under the well-being heading. And so, first of all, I really appreciated the reference to results to academic success made in this report because of the direct tie between, the board's expectations around this operational expectation and then that impact on academic success of our students. So, appreciated that. And then when I think about well-being in terms of student achievement, I think about first the student's ability to understand, where they are at in their learning, where they are at in their achievement, but then also, where do they go from here to then be able to achieve that next level of achievement. So I'm particularly interested because of that, by a comment from that page under the well-being heading where it says 8 school development plans were focused on persistence and perseverance. And so can you please just explain a little bit about what those goals would look like in the school development plans and how do our educators help students develop in those areas?
Through the chair, thank you for the acknowledgement of the direct connections and links of these reports to results too as well. The examples of school development plan goals that were specific to the persistence and perseverance section really highlighted or centered around a few areas. First and foremost, for the goals that students would improve their capacity to demonstrate perseverance, tolerance, and acceptance when challenged, physically, socially, and emotionally. And so if you look at a goal like that, apply that in the context of physical education, apply that in the context of students engaged in their academic learning, as well as their interpersonal relationships. While it is a broader goal, when separated and linked directly to curriculum, it is something that is mapped specific to how we define perseverance, what tolerance looks like, and acceptance specifically. Another 2 examples are student achievement in exploring roles and responsibilities to work towards life and learning goals and engaging in learning with confidence and persistence, will improve. So with respect to that nature of a goal, and again, I'm capturing a range of goals in one here for simplicity, where they're really looking at the active role of students in their role, their responsibilities, and how they demonstrate that persistence. And then finally, student personal development related to confidence and persistence in and through learning will improve. Those are broad goals then applied specifically to their academic disciplines and also more broadly to the culture within the school. If I break that down into examples of the work being done by staff alongside students to help them achieve those goals, some of those actions of staff would be the direct teaching of resiliency strategies to support self-regulation, especially through the lens of health curriculum at all levels, supporting students in implementing effective strategies for resilience in order to maintain regulation in challenging decisions, or in challenging situations, And if you break that down, it would be also then part of defining what a challenging situation is, explicitly teaching about what that looks like, and then the skills alongside. In many cases, we're seeing the incorporation of student voice to inform and help design the learning tasks so that they can align to those goals, the intentional instruction specific to student self-advocacy skills, using picture books to help students develop social emotional skills, including self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship skills. And then, as even was evidenced through the presentation earlier, the use of the holistic lifelong learning framework to improve student understanding of themselves, and then consider where their able to engage with the learning task in front of them through classroom discussion and the decision making. Again, while those are broadly applied, the more specific local measures that then attach to that are relative to student voice, student surveys, and then also ongoing assessments that a school will do specific to perhaps a grade or a demographic of students where they're looking to understand their growth in those particular areas.
Trustee Close.
Thank you, Chair Hack. I really appreciated reading this report, and as I read through it, I kept saying to myself, well, what are the examples? And then later on in the report, all the examples were illustrated. So my questions are related to the indicator 2, more specifically to the collaboration and calibration between staff. One of the things I've noticed when I've been visiting schools, lucky enough to visit schools, is that demonstration of learning, also the connection to school development plans and to our results policies. It's very strongly evidenced when you go and visit schools, which is very exciting. And I do know that I have one specific example where they actually used the bulletin boards. So each grade on their classroom bulletin board used the evidence of what their success could look like, and we had students actually present what that meant to them, and then you had examples of their work. And the thing that really struck me, that was phenomenal in itself, but what really struck me was also the point of that for staff at that school, as they walked through the hallways, they could see the calibration of what the exemplars are and what that growth is, and so that was phenomenal in my mind. I'm going to assume that some of the evidence that we're seeing is an analysis from examining all school development plans, so I'm not going to ask that question, but one of the specific questions I had in reading this area was the changes in measures examples. So you referenced an increase in the number of schools using standardized diagnostic assessments. Is this something we want to achieve? Are we ensuring consistency across the school system? Is it a goal to have schools use consistent assessments? Thanks.
Through the chair, certainly having consistent standardized diagnostic assessments is a direction that we are headed in, though not in all areas at all times. That would not be appropriate. And so when you think about where we have prioritized our frameworks, specifically the literacy and mathematics frameworks, we are linking and working through the identification of quality assessments that really does support a degree of efficiency and a depth of knowledge of how and what to respond to for staff, irrespective of the school they're in. We also, though, recognize that those diagnostic assessments must be directly linked to purpose and action. And anytime we are committing time to an assessment, the consideration of value add and informing both teacher and student is at the forefront. In other subject areas, schools are developing common assessments, and that's completely appropriate, where they're utilizing those across multiple classes and sections of grades, where they would be working to calibrate that specific to a series of outcomes or a broader context of understanding that they would be mapping out over time. We will not be pursuing standardized in-year assessments in all areas across all elements, but there are specific priorities, and we'll continue to work through that in a way that serves students and staff well.
Trustee Dennis.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that question, Trustee Close, because my question is somewhat related when we're talking about assessment. And so I appreciated the comments that not only I saw on page 9 of 24 in the report, but also in your opening remarks about how educators were given an opportunity to assess students using a number of different tools. And so intuitively, that makes a lot of sense to me, to have options for educators to use to be able to help students understand where they are at in their progress, and just generally speaking then the entire school through their school development plan. So I'm a bit curious about the degree of flexibility and adaptability that is built into a school development plan. There's a lot of material to cover in the curriculum, and I think sometimes the school year can go by really quickly when you're trying to fit it all in. And so I'm just wondering, I guess, in terms of that adaptability and flexibility, how often is it prudent, I guess, to be assessing students on their progress with the eye of being able then to make meaningful changes to programs and practice?
Through the chair, dependent on the assessment, first of all, if I reference some of our early years assessments, such as the early years evaluation, the reading readiness screening tool, the LENS or CC3, which are two provincial assessments, those are assessments that we would only be looking at completing 2 times per year or broken into smaller segments over the course of the year. In the case of the RRST, depending on the student and how it is they're moving through that particular assessment. So the answer is it depends on the assessment. That said, as I had referenced in Trustee Close's answer, we need to be careful that we are not over-assessing for the sake of it, and that action comes from that. And as you highlighted in your opening, there's a great deal to work through in the course of a school year. It is one of the reasons why when we look at a school development plan, it is not a reflection of all elements of work that are occurring within a school. It does provide focus in specific areas that we are intentionally measuring, similar to results 2 and the priorities set out by the board. This is an area we'll need to continue to consider as we move forward with new curriculum around how we provide flexibility to allow for the space for schools to engage in instruction and assessment when it is prudent to do so. Typically, with the larger scale assessments, those, however, are occurring once or twice over the course of a year and are intended at key points to be able to provide decision-making or organization within a school in terms of allocation of supports that maybe need to move based on students.
Trustee Close?
Thank you. Continuing with the focus on program changes, like looking at evidence of local measures for program changes, I had a very enthusiastic new elementary school parent that loves the focus on land-based learning and saw, well, and they're adjacent to Fish Creek Provincial Park, so lots of opportunities there. But she asked me about, does this continue all the way through high school? And I couldn't answer her. So I'm asking.
Through the chair. So absolutely, the answer would be yes. So many of our high school staff and students are engaging in Indigenous land-based learning. And that would be reflective, of course, of our Indigenous Educational Holistic Lifelong Learning Framework. And this involves bringing Indigenous knowledge into curricular learning experiences. So it isn't always land-based learning, but it can be. But it can also be other Indigenous ways of learning and knowing and being that is brought into the classroom teachings as well. So those teachings can be incorporated into core and complementary course offerings. And it can be done in many ways through the use of texts, resources, writing prompts, and certainly in land-based learning, the location of where the learning occurs, which can be on the land. It's also important to note that sometimes that type of learning can also respectfully bring land into the classroom as well, where the land, features from the land can be further studied, thinking about in science, maybe through a laboratory investigation, but also even just invoking further reading and writing experiences. So hopefully that can affirm your suspicion, probably, that yes, it occurs at all grade levels.
Thank you. Trustee Close, go ahead to the next question.
Thank you. Moving to, oh my goodness, I used an acronym and I can't remember what it stands for. The Career Technology Foundation, CTF. Grades 5 and 9. When I looked at the evidence that was provided, the first question that came to mind for me was how many middle junior high schools do we have? So I know there's certainly depth and breadth of program offerings at the high school level, but I'm not sure that I would know that that breadth and depth exists at the middle school. So wondering also if there's a program evaluation that would middle school offerings through an equity lens so that we're offering it across the system.
Through the chair, we have, excluding our unique settings, there are 55 middle schools that also include the 7 to 9 portion at Queen Elizabeth High School. When you speak about the programming offered across all of those schools, certainly there is variability in CTF programming. It does remain a priority in middle schools, and certainly that's evidenced according to the increase that's documented within the OE report in course registrations for students within the grade range, and that's an increase of over 15,000 individual course enrollments over the previous year. So I would say that that does speak to our school's commitment to effective CTF programming availability. It's not the intention of CTF specifically to recreate the high school CTS programming and selection at the middle school level. That said, you can see the range of courses that are offered across middle schools. It varies greatly when you look at how that's documented, as evidenced on page 512. The range of CTF offerings can be impacted by staffing and expertise, facility limitations and equipment, as well as the size of middle school. And by that I mean smaller middle schools have typically different ways of organizing simply due to having the critical mass of students that a larger middle school may have to be able to provide different types. And so it may shift the number of options actually needed to serve all of the students in the school. Middle school instructional hours and in some cases alternative program standards of practice also guide the level of selection that will be available at different schools. To your final question around the program evaluation framework being utilized to assess this programming, given the cost, facility, staffing, and programmatic commitments, it's certainly an area that would benefit from greater review and understanding for a longer-term plan. I would also highlight, we know that there remains commitment across the province specific to career education, and as we engage in understanding curriculum development, we'll continue to monitor those external factors as well as we guide our internal programming.
Trustee Vukadinovich, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hack. Continuing on the CTF stream, I'm heartened to hear in the presentation that unique pathways enrollment at the CBE increased by over 7%. And I'm always floored by the multitude of impressive offerings in career and technology for CBE students. Just this past year, as many people know, I had the opportunity to see the entire house that is located inside of Jack James School and learn about how since 1998, over 3,000 students have built 25 homes for 25 families through the city of Calgary, with entire houses that are actually built inside the high school and then moved. I've also visited the CTS Center at Lord Shaughnessy School and seen in person the facilities available there. The culinary program, it's not just a regular kitchen like I had in my junior high home ec days. It's a professional commercial kitchen. The media design studio is more than just a camcorder. The challenge is, though, it's not cheap to run quality CTS programs, even with the support of our amazing corporate and post-secondary partners. Steel costs money, appliances and equipment cost money, fuel costs money. And ultimately, the decision about whether to fund existing CTF programs, which is the more fiscally conservative approach to doing this, or whether to start brand new duplicative CTF programs lies with the provincial government. So my question is, from an intergovernmental relations perspective, what does the CBE do to welcome MLAs into our schools and to raise awareness of the CBE's excellent career and technology programs?
Through the chair, bear with us. We certainly, on a number of occasions, as the board is well aware, we receive requests from elected officials to visit our schools, and it's something that we're quite proud of, and that has happened through the years. And we know that in addition to MLAs. We've had others, elected officials who are, whether it's at city or others who have actually visited our schools, and I know that the board as well, through the proud to be CBE, you've had the opportunity and continue to have the opportunity to showcase the excellent programming in our schools. And I must say that I very much appreciate that question, because what it speaks to is a celebration of what makes the incredible programming across our district. And we have to do more to showcase and highlight so that not only elected officials, but members of the public are well aware of the incredible programming that happens in our schools. And as we visit schools, and I know superintendents visit schools, and I visit schools regularly, as you're aware, I see that in action, and it's worth celebrating. And I know you referenced a particular school. We have examples of those in schools across our city. So I would just offer that as a brief response. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll also add that we have a protocol for having MLAs within the area that we are allowed to invite into our schools. So we can do part of that process. Our MLAs can also contact the schools. We have them as well as MPs throughout Calgary visiting fairly regularly. So exciting work. I have Trustee Dennis with the next question.
Great, thank you so much. Sorry, I'm going to go back to, I guess, to the dual credit and exploratory programs topic, and I'm kind of interested in these numbers. So when I look at the 89% percentage of students who completed programs, that is an impressive number, right? And that 75% went on to employment or post-secondary studies. To me, that is signaling success within the CBE in terms of these programs. But I'm looking at the numbers. So there's 408 students, and of course we have many more students than that in our system. And I'm wondering, what is some of the work that we are doing or could do to be able to expand access to these programs so that even more students could participate?
Through the chair, there's actually been a fair number of basic actions that have been taken, first of all, just to increase awareness. And so significant changes have occurred to our external site in working with communication and engagement services, as well as in our direct communication to families around upcoming programs. A large part of this is very different from the high school our students' parents would have attended in many cases. And there remains an assumption of what those more traditional options may be, as opposed to what now actually exists. The other element, speaking to access and across our city, is really working through flexible scheduling. So when we look at students who wish to enroll in specific unique pathways programming or dual credit programming or exploratory programming, in some cases, that program may require 2 weeks of on-site for half a day for those 2-week time periods. And so with some of the work that we've been doing centrally together with high school contacts and student services, it's working through that flexibility and making sure it's understood how those can occur to provide these experiences everywhere. The other prioritization that we've done, and this was just instituted over the course of this last year, was prioritizing the off-campus coordinator position at every one of our high schools. And that was a financial commitment across the system for all high schools to ensure that students had a lead person at every high school to access work experience wrap or any of the other programming elements as well, and that expertise was well known. When we think about access that can be limited by facility, there continue to be opportunities as we look at our use of technology and virtual access. Certainly that has been proven to be successful when linked to our post-secondary dual credit programming. I would highlight again that schools, or centrally, we are prioritizing a teacher who is attached to those courses. One of the reasons why our success rate is what it is in dual credit programming, which again I want to highlight is post-secondary coursework that our students are completing in high school, is the level of support that they have also from the assigned teacher through the CBE, not solely through the professor they may be receiving the course material through. And this is another reason why we encourage students to engage in these particular programs. So from an accessibility standpoint, it's communication, resourcing effectively across all high schools, and looking at alternative methods to ensure that the access to programming and area of focus can be available at somewhere in one of our high schools, that we are able to then expand that programming when it's scalable.
Trustee Dennis, follow up?
Thank you so much. So on page 16 of 24, we talk about the barrier removal funding that we offer students. So can you just give us an idea of what that barrier removal funding helps cover?
The barrier removal funding is extremely important for students, and in terms of ensuring that individual students have access for students who are identified with financial need. This includes through our schools who are identified on our equity index, or for students who have applied for waivers. And that barrier removal funding looks after personal protective equipment required for any dual credit or exploratory programming, examples work boots, safety clothes, etc. Tuition for dual credit programming, textbooks, and learning module costs, as well as certification testing costs, so a safety credential course as an example. It also covers transportation costs associated with getting to the on-site experiences, which is a significant and important aspect to this particular programming and its success. And then lastly, it also serves to cover the employment kits that are required for specific programs. Students who are ready for employment or who have been vetted for employment during the program are supported with these kits. An example would be startup tools that are particular for their trade, like a pipe toolkit, where they would need measuring tapes, pipe wrench, threader, etc. So they're starting off in that employment experience with those tools already. So the barrier removal funding is of critical importance to ensuring that all students have access to this program.
Thank you so much. Just a really quick follow-up on that. And so the funding so CBE sets aside funding specifically for that purpose. I just want to be clear where that funding comes from, and are there opportunities for community to be able to invest in that?
Through the chair, I thank you for that follow-up question. The barrier removal funding is provided through Education Matters, through donors, and in that particular context, anyone interested in supporting barrier removal funding directly, certainly working with Education Matters as our key partner to be able to provide that to students is wonderful.
Trustee Close?
I want to follow up on Trustee Fukudivinici's. I can't speak this morning, sorry. I'm not even going to try again. A comment on showcasing and celebrating and being proud of what we offer within our unique pathways. I know from just recent experience in touring MLAs to Lord Shaughnessy, but not just MLAs, but our city councillors, to be able to see actually what goes on in our high schools in support of the trades careers, but also at the same time to be able to see that there could be an academically focused university person taking welding because it's offered. And that is so fantastic to witness that and for them to be able to fit it into their schedule. But I want to just drill down a little bit further before I ask my other question. From administration's point of view, what would you like to see celebrated when we look at our trades, the trades career pathways specifically?
Through the chair, from a celebration standpoint and specific to unique pathways and the trades, I would highlight the critical partnerships that we have with key trades partners and industry across the city. as one. This allows and ensures that our students have direct access to employment and that we are also staying tightly connected to meeting the needs that industry is identifying through those courses. I would also celebrate the fact that we are able to manage our resources. That certainly, this type of programming does require enhanced resources. We are managing them in a way to maintain as great as access as possible. It is something that we need to continue to explore. However, it's not something that can only be accessed at one spot in the city. We have been very strategic and the work that high school principals, together with staff, together with our central team linked to Unique Pathways, in determining when they may expand programming. I'll use culinary programming as a key example. It was highlighted at Bowness High School earlier this year through government. We also have culinary programming that results in students receiving certification and access to employment at a high level and great city partnerships. And so that's been really critical to the success for our students and the quality of their programming. So partnership to industry, strategic access across the city, and then I would highlight the work of our teachers, and alongside that, the work of the instructional assistants who are also there in support of those very specific trades as well. The commitment, creativity, and development that they engage in across each of our high schools is something to be seen. Certainly you would have seen that through the Career and Technology Center, but I would highlight whether you go to Lord Beaverbrook or you go to Nelson Mandela or you go to Lester B. Pearson, across the board, Forest Lawn, when we think about all of those pieces, Trustee Vukadinovich also highlighted the work at Jack James. It's real, it results in employment, and it results in students pursuing greater education.
Trustee Close, go ahead.
I'm going to be careful how I word this, or maybe not, but when people talk about STEM, I'm not sure I fully know what they mean. I know it stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, and I witnessed that in each of our high schools across the system. But I do know that there's media articles or parents' questions of looking elsewhere to have that focus fulfilled for their children. And I'm just wondering, how do we change that perception that, because I believe that we offer complementary or better courses related to what people think of when they talk about STEM. So I'm just wondering if it's a naming thing or a marketing piece, but would love your thoughts on how do we answer that question of what is CBE's focus on STEM?
Through the chair, appreciate the tightrope that you've placed in front. While we do have schools who link programming provided directly through the naming of STEM opportunities, so we do have middle schools who will identify a STEM, whether they call it a pathway or a course or a module. I would characterize STEM relative to packaging of distinct types of learning. They can be all brought together and summarized as some schools may do, and in other cases, it may not be brought forward or shared with community in the same way, though all of those same characteristics are present. Across the CBE, we also have our science alternative programming that provides that, and when you look at our high school course programming that's available, and this is outside of Unique Pathways even, where you look at the robotics courses and extracurricular elements that are hugely successful. We have students who are participating at world international competitions in robotics and winning. We have students who are, and they're not in a identified STEM program, but the sum total of the courses that they're taking are building towards that pre-engineering, computer programming, all of those elements. Those pathways exist within high schools, and dependent on the middle school may also exist there. Our consideration is always how we present those elements and communicate them to community. So I'll go back to Trustee Dennis's earlier question, something to make sure that people are aware of. It has become a way of being known. That said, it remains a commitment within CBE to ensure that these are key areas for the future, and how we communicate that ensures that we are what we say we are, and that we reflect those elements with quality is our first commitment.
Trustee Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you so much. First, I'll just comment on the conversation here around the STEM education. I recently had yet another opportunity to visit Nelson Mandela High School on one of their weekend tournaments in robotics. Remarkable work happening, and just the enthusiasm of the students and their teachers who are supporting them. And the competition that they're creating, not only just as they compete against each other within the CBE, but also other schools that are being invited into those competitions, and our students are faring tremendously, I will say. So my final question on this report is related to page 22 of 24. And the statement is that CBE received an Alberta Education route assessment for each route, and all concerns were addressed by October 31, and 100% of school bus stops and zones were found to be in compliance. So just curious about what were some of the concerns identified through the Alberta Education route assessment, and were these concerns unexpected?
Through the chair. Were they unexpected? The reason the forum exists is to identify things that could potentially happen, and so they were unknown at the time that they were identified using the route assessment, but they weren't unexpected in the sense that when you're preparing routes over a computer versus when you're actually going onto the site and recognizing that, oh, this is an issue, and so now there's a change that has to happen. And some of those changes that might have to happen is poor sight lines. For example, if there are tree branches that might be blocking visibility at a specific intersection, if there's insufficient space at the bus stop for the bus to be loaded and unloaded, merging. So if, for example, the route that was proposed had the bus merging and then immediately having to turn left, and so having to cross through all that traffic and potentially miss that intersection. So those are the kinds of things that it will identify, that the assessment will catch, and will allow us to adjust for. So not necessarily unexpected, but we didn't know about them until we conducted the assessment.
Switching gears back to, I guess, the beginning of the conversation in supports for achievement and wellness, page 16 and 24, I see that we're compliant with the sections that state area learning team referrals demonstrate that principals access system-wide supports and services to support student achievement and wellness. And I'm glad we're able to supply some of those supports through the centralized support that CBE offers. And I see that you gave evidence that all principals know how to ask for help and did so last year. My question goes one layer down. Do we track or know how many parent or student, where appropriate, requests come in and actually get passed along through the principal? Is there a bottleneck at any point in this process? I guess what I'm getting at is, are there principals who may not be experts in all the specific areas of wellness or that, who personally are deciding what to pass along, what not, what to handle in versus centralized supports? And how can we as an organization ensure that communication is happening for that continuum?
Thank you, Chair Hack. So I think one of the most important pieces to highlight in response to this question is that parents should always feel that they're part of the child's learning team. So we know that they're the primary educators of children. They possess unique knowledge about their child and their learning, and they should complement the knowledge of the school at all times. So they should definitely be seen as partners in this work. So most of that, of course, occurs through conversation between usually the parent and the classroom teacher. And so there is ongoing dialogue at that level to determine what the students' needs are. And so that would be a fairly normal process for all, what we would hope for all students. If students' needs become different than I guess what was expected or supported within a normal classroom setting, then we would go through our continuum of supports. So again, many children can be successful with sort of the least intrusive support possible, which is in the class with the different strategies or supports that could be used to help with their learning. And then sometimes extending to sort of the tier 2 continuum where there are other experts or strategies that are available within the school that could be provided some support. So those pieces, of course, are not included in our total number of ALT referrals because those are ones that happen at the school level. But just, and I know that you are aware of that, but just sort of pointing that out, that would be a sort of a normal place for our parents to be working alongside the school. But certainly we do have the area learning team process because we recognize that there are some that need to move upwards into a tier 3 type of support or response where there is further request for assistance beyond what's available at the school. And so again, that would generally be happening with the parent working alongside the school. So the parent might have a discrete request, but oftentimes it's again in that collaborative sort of team approach with the school and the parent acting together. And then those requests are brought forward through an ALT request as noted. So in short, to answer your question, we don't drill down on whether it's a parent sole request or if it is from the school and the parent or just the school. We would always want it to be a team approach where we are looking at the parent working in support and in collaboration with the school on these. And certainly a parent's voice in what their child's education should look like and be assessed and all of those pieces that come as part of a possible ALT referral, they do have significant voice in that. But we do want them to work alongside the school to make sure that we're landing it within the proper continuum of supports.
Thank you. Trustee Bolger, go ahead.
Okay, since we're back on that topic, so given that the ALT process resulted in this year we're looking at in 5,137 referral requests, were we able to meet the majority of these requests for support, and were any areas more difficult than the other to support?
So through Chair Hack, yes, we were able to meet the majority of these requests. Again, a lot of those that don't even come there are met at the school level through that tier 1 and 2. But those of the 5,000 plus that come through our ALT referrals would move through some sort of process within the ALT. So it could be that it comes to a professional at that level for consultation, who could be providing strategies back to the classroom teacher, the principal, that might be supportive and helpful. Again, looking at what is the least intrusive way to support this child possible at the school setting. Other times it can move forward to other pieces that we've talked about in the past, which would include program placements or it can include some sort of specialized assessment. So probably the one area where we would have the most demand and sort of need to triage is with a psychological assessment. And we generally do that based on what needs come forward that require the greatest attention first, but also looking to have a process by which we can meet all of those needs. When they come later in the year, we would carry them forward to the next school year as long as the student remains with us. And I think there has been significant support through some of the latest provincial funding announcements that have been made, where there's external services provided for psychological assessments, as well as programs like the ISSP, which are expanding, that have a psychologist attached that can also provide assessments. So we're hoping that between making sure that we're always catching up and making sure that all of the students on our list do get assessments, as if that is the necessary next step, as well as what the province is offering, we should be in pretty good shape.
Trustees with any other questions on OE3? Okay. We now come to the point where trustees are asked to identify their intentions to bring forward any motions related to compliance with this operational expectations. Any trustees who wish to bring forward a motion regarding exceptions, defining the evidence to be compliant, or a motion of commendation for exceptional performance in a particular area should provide the corporate secretary and all trustees with the proposed motions by noon Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. If there are no exceptions or accommodations, then this item will be placed on the consent agenda for March 7th, 2023 board meeting with the motion that the Board of Trustees approves that the Chief Superintendent is in compliance with the provisions of OE3 instructional program. Next on our agenda is item 7.1, Chief Superintendent's update. I understand trustees have some questions on this report. Trustee Close, go ahead.
I'll try and say Susan's name again. I just want to appreciate that Trustee Vukadinovich pulled this report. I do have a question. I know from just past life that Youth Central that has applications for students to be on the Mayor's Youth Council, that they conduct an informal survey, and this year they actually asked what are the 3 biggest issues facing youth in Calgary today. And concerns shared were vast and related to learning loss, youth employment, mental health. Vaping is always a conversation that happens. Stress, discrimination, climate crisis, etc. And so I was just curious, what type of issues are students on your advisory council raising, and what does that dialogue look like? Thanks, Chief.
True to share, sorry. Well, thank you for that question. I think that's it's a wonderful opportunity to highlight incredible young people we have in our system. The Chief Superintendent Student Advisory Council, just a little bit of context, and then I'll get to your question, represents high school students across the CBE. We have 2 students who are per high school selected by the administration, and each of those students also have a staff advisor. That we have 2 central staff, we have a system lead, as well as an education director who oversees that work, and Superintendent Holokar is as the lead in terms of that space. What I will share with you is that we wanted to make sure that that body was reflective of the total student population across our system and reflect the diversity of the students that we serve, because it's important that we hear directly from students on those issues that impact their lives and also their learning. And you've identified those topics. They're quite topical among young people, and I think it's important for us to do so. What I can share with you is that these students reflect, as I indicated, a diverse body representing students from different ethnic groups, gender diversity, religious background, sexual orientation. So we have quite, our principals have done an excellent job in making sure that that representation is at the table. What I would mention in terms of, so because of COVID, the last 2 school years, we were not able to meet in person, and yet those meetings continued. They continued online, and in fact, we extended it to K-12. So you can only imagine what the feedback was like from actually grade 1 to 12, if I stand corrected. The youngsters obviously were supported by their teachers in terms of those very guided questions. But I'll get to your question in terms of the biggest issues facing that they've identified. So we had a meeting recently, in fact, 2 weeks ago, I think it was. I think we've met 3 times this year, twice in person and 1 virtual session. They're just incredible students, and I think next time they're in the building, if trustees are around, we should actually invite them to you can actually listen and interact with them, and it's just incredible. Their forthrightness and just their incredible sense of the work that's happening. I would also mention that in the past, we've actually had students present to school leaders around matters that affect them and those conditions that create successful learning environments. So we've done that at a system leadership meeting, which was very well received. And the board will be pleased to know that many of these conversations centered around the board priorities, achievement, equity, and well-being. So the students have actually been very targeted in making those, in bringing those forward. What I would say, and I know, I know that there was another question related to this as well, and I'll pause there if there's a follow-up or if Superintendent Oloker would like to add to my comments. What I would say in terms of we know that mental health is a significant challenge. I was actually surprised when students mentioned last year, actually it was the year before, issues around vaping in schools and in some of our communities, in some of our school communities. And I think trustees are well aware of some of the challenges that we had with respect to some protests. Some of our students in some of our schools, where the superintendents of school improvement have done an excellent job working with our school leaders, our principals and education director, addressing some of those issues. So those are some of the issues that these youngsters do. I would just say, before I pass it over for additional comments, I would say to you that it's one of the most exciting meetings that we have, and it's almost everyone is present. It's well attended, and I know that the energy in the room is palpable. So I'd like to just invite Superintendent to make a comment to add to this. Thanks, please.
Thanks, Chief Usi, and through Chair Hack. You know, I think Chief Usi has shared all the highlights of being able to meet with such an incredible group of students. But I think just to pinpoint on the answer, the focus really for this year has been on well-being, which would certainly capture the elements of mental health that have been sort of a pervasive topic among youth over the past few years, but also kind of really honing in on a sense of belonging within their schools and giving us perspective from students as to how they view this for themselves as well as for other students. And some of the work they've done between those meetings is actually trying to gather voice from other students, particularly those they wouldn't normally interact with, and get their perspective on these issues as well. And then I think the kind of the bonus we have from working with these students is really allowing their voice to feel elevated and to be elevated right up to the highest level of the chief superintendent, but also to help them understand the importance of leadership and their own leadership, and really, you know, many of them, of course, are already leaders within their communities, but really prime them for the leadership they can see for themselves in the future.
Trustee Vukadinovich, go ahead.
Thank you. Chief Superintendent UC and Superintendent Holoka, that answer to Trustee Close's question was so comprehensive that I no longer have a question, but if I just may speak for a moment, I just love that our Chief Superintendent has a Student Advisory Council, and I love that meetings have resumed. And I'm so pleased to hear of our students participating in this important leadership opportunity and making a difference in the excellence of our system. So thank you.
Any further questions? All right. Next on our agenda is the annual monitoring of results to academic success. On January 17th and 31st, 2023, trustees had the opportunity to ask questions regarding this report. The report is now on the agenda for the board to consider whether the chief superintendent is making reasonable progress with provisions of results to academic success. It is now the board's responsibility to consider the report as evidence of reasonable organizational progress in the results area. The board has previously approved the reasonable interpretations of this results policy, which has set the stage for effective monitoring of actual organizational performance. I would like to remind trustees that today our job is to determine whether or not the report provides sufficient evidence that the CBE has made reasonable progress towards achieving this result, and to build the portfolio of the Chief Superintendent's performance in the results half of the Chief Superintendent's job expectations. I would request the trustee bring forward a motion regarding this report. Trustee Close, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hack. I'll bring forward that the Board of Trustees has reviewed the monitoring report for results 2, academic success, and concludes that reasonable progress has been made toward the ultimate achievement of this results policy, with the exception of students who self-identify as Indigenous in all academic areas.
Do trustees have any questions about the motion? The motion on the floor is that the Board of Trustees has reviewed the monitoring report for results to academic success and concludes that reasonable progress is being made towards the ultimate achievement of this results policy, with the exception of students who self-identify as Indigenous in all academic areas. Trustee Close, would you please open debate?
Thank you. The board approved indicators of success are our guideposts for helping us determine if reasonable progress is being made. So today our role is to see if we have enough evidence and data analysis to determine if the CBE is making reasonable progress towards the achievement of our academic success results policy. I think in reviewing that analysis, we also have to take in the impacts of COVID into consideration. Progress doesn't mean perfection. Progress isn't always continuously moving forward. Progress is sometimes not falling back as far as you might have given the challenging circumstances of the last couple of years. A comment on our indicators. We have disaggregated our report card data by division and level of achievement. We've disaggregated our provincial achievement tests and diploma exams by cohorts related to all students, English language learners, students who self-identify as Indigenous, and students with identified special education needs. This is important work, and as some trustees have shared in the past, an important way to cast a light on areas where we need to improve. In speaking about the indicators and context together, when we look at the standardized test scores, they did drop province-wide, but the context is that we didn't have tests in 2020, they were optional in 2021, which also means that we have students new to taking what some call, or what I might call, high-stakes testing, a one-day assessment result versus a true continuum of demonstrated learning. Did we maintain overall the same level of results as 2018, 2019? I think we probably should say no, we didn't. Report card data, useful in identifying needs and gaps. Personally for me, that I'm looking at grade 2 results or grade 8 results, might not be as conclusive as past years, the report card assessments, but they initiate questions on trends and further assessments, and that is powerful. When it comes to high school completion rates, rates continue to increase and at a higher rate than the provincial results. Although our trend is the CBE's high school completion rates are lower than the province's overall, we are narrowing the gaps. We are demonstrating continuous improvement, incremental steps, but progress nonetheless. I will leave it to other trustees to fill in the numbers from their analysis of progress, but I do encourage you to support today's recommendation, which is also our Chief Superintendent's analysis when it comes to making reasonable progress and exceptions related to academic success. I look forward to hearing your debate and analysis.
Trustees for round 1 of debate. Trustee Vukadinovich, go ahead.
I'm entering this debate at this point leaning towards voting against this motion, but open to be having my mind changed. For many years, schools in Alberta and elsewhere in North America were deeply steeped in the knowledge and traditions that settlers brought with them. But since the 1990s, the CBE has been on a journey to continually get better at incorporating Indigenous culture programs and Indigenous ways of knowing and being into our schools. Over my time as a trustee and over previous years of looking at reports, I see evidence that every year we are seeing improvement in the graduation rates of Indigenous students, the academic outcomes of Indigenous students, and the number of students who are proud to self-identify as Indigenous and who say they feel welcomed and safe at CBE schools. Thanks to the ongoing efforts of teachers, staff, and administration, we now have the CBE's Indigenous Education Holistic Lifelong Learning Framework, which provides us with an even stronger foundation upon which to meet the holistic needs of all our students. I'm worried that if we look at all of this and we say that we're falling short, it sends a message that we need to change gears yet again. And rather than changing gears yet again, I'd love to see continuous improvement in the framework and the foundation that we're already building. And so I would prefer to support passing the report on results 2 without this amendment, because I'm hesitant to send a message that unless students who self-identify as Indigenous achieve success through a settler colonial lens of having their success look exactly like mainstream success. I'm worried that we're going to have yet another gigantic turn of the wheel when maybe it's time to just go at things a little slower and to accept progress as it's happening in a good way.
Trustee May, go ahead.
I think for me, though, I don't think it is, that is the message. That's not what I get. What I get is that throughout the years, we've seen this gap and that we're improving the gap. And so I don't think nowhere in the report there's an indication that a big, huge system change is going to happen. I think it's continuing to change. And so for me, I appreciate that it's been identified. I appreciate all the work that's happening and that things take time. And so for me, I think it's important that the exception's still there. And I don't think we're asking for a major change here. We're asking for continuance and just having these systems work through the process. So, I mean, it'd be fantastic that perhaps in a couple of years this is off and it's no longer highlighted, but I think it's important that we do recognize the exception.
Trustee Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you so much. First thing I want to say is to our Chief Superintendent and your team, thank you so much for this comprehensive report. When I look at what this report used to look like compared to what it looks like today, there's exponential improvement, and I just want to thank you so much for the great work that's been done on this report. And I especially appreciate the analysis sections. That has made this report far more meaningful and live for me, so thank you so much for that. I will be supporting the motion, and I guess I'll explain why. You know, when you look at reasonable progress over time, and like Trustee Close had mentioned, that sometimes reasonable progress means staying the same or not falling back, and sometimes it does mean moving forward. But there are a couple of things that I would like to highlight from last school year when we compared the provincial results at the acceptable standard. CBE students generally had better diploma examination results, and certainly want to highlight that in Math 30.30-2, the percent of CBE students achieving the acceptable standard was 11.7 percentage points higher than the province. And also would note that 19% of students achieved the standard of excellence in the Math 30-1 diploma exam for the 2021-22 school year. Our students have consistently performed really well in science, and so I would really like to highlight some of the excellent work that's being done by our students in science. You know, that we're outperforming the province also in 5 of 8 provincial achievement tests. But when you look at the results of our 30 level courses in science, 38% of students in biology 30, 43% of students in chem 30, and 48% of students in physics 30 met the standard of excellence in their achievement. So we have a lot to be proud of when we look at our students' achievement. And I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to save the rest of my debate for round 2.
Any other trustees for round 1? Trustee Bolger, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hack. So I'm also speaking in support of this motion and appreciate the thoroughness of the report. In looking at Results Policy 2, we continue to see strong results for the CBE, which is something to be very proud of. These results reflect the ongoing perseverance and commitment by our students and teachers and administration during a very challenging time in education and in society overall. In the all students category for high school completion rates, we see overall strong and continued improving results. For our students with special education needs, particularly in the areas of ELA and math, we see positive results and evidence of continual improvement. The support being provided to these students is clearly impacting results in a positive way. And although we see a decline in overall ELA and math PAT results, the Calgary Board of Education continues to outperform the province. Taking into account disruptions in schools and that these exams were suspended for 2 years during the pandemic is worth noting. The Calgary Board of Education Science and Social Studies marks show improvement in all 4 divisions, which is fantastic, including for our ELL and special education students, as well as our Indigenous students, with the exception of some in Division 4. So thank you.
I'll add my 2 cents in here, and I know that when Trustee Close was saying some people will bring statistics and numbers, I'm actually not going to do that. I know she looked at me. And here's why. I can tell the way that this was written, that administration was comparing our results this year to the 2018-2019 academic year, and that there was some nervousness around that. And I do want to start off by saying personally that the 2018-2019 was a very, very different time. To some of us, it felt like just yesterday in some regards, and to others, it felt like a vastly different world than our current situation. The current pandemic was and continues to be a massive disruptor and reset in so many ways. Workplaces don't look the same. Family dynamics have changed. At the very core of what makes us human and the ways we connect has massively changed. When I look at this report, I do see reasonable progress in all areas with the exception noted. This exception, I hope that Trustee Vukadinovich can support with the exception, because it gives focus to what the CBE still needs to work on and keeps up the work in this area. Maintaining, I didn't see massive changes in the report, but the work isn't done. It doesn't just stop. It's a work in progress, and I would hope that my colleagues would support this motion as provided. Thank you. Trustee Downey, do you want to enter round one here?
Yes, thank you. So I do agree with Trustee Vukadinovich that we have yet to decolonize education in Canada. It's a national issue. We do know that our Indigenous education team is doing fantastic and amazing work, as are all of our teachers across the system. And I know that the people on our Indigenous education team, our elders and knowledge keepers that work with us, and many, many of our teachers are making a huge difference in the lives of our students. I know that all students are capable of learning and demonstrating their knowledge. And so it's with this lens that I feel we must maintain this exception that we also chose to apply to this report when presented to us last year. Change is happening, as many trustees have indicated, but I think we have yet to see the amount of change that we know that all of our students are capable of. So I would like to keep the exception on this.
Trustees for round two of debate. Trustee Vukadinovich, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hack. I still have some concern that we're burying the good news story here. Our high school graduation rates are up. We are outperforming the province on our PATs. We're doing excellent work here. And there's the other aspect of this is, and I know I've brought this up before, but the indicators that we currently use, and I know that they're approved by us, the board, so I take responsibility, but they don't fully resonate with me. And in this particular case, I would love to see indicators around the success of our Indigenous students that are developed by Indigenous leaders in our community, by our Elder Advisory Council, by the staff members we have who are experts in this area. Maybe that's part of the challenge. And not that I want to tip into the racism of low expectations either. I have every confidence that our Indigenous students who are self-identify as Indigenous are capable of achieving everything that all of our other students achieve. But at the same time as well, when we're using indicators that were developed with the school system as it was to measure the success of students going into the future, we might end up in a cycle for decades of having something appear to be not successful when it actually is successful. So despite feeling like I might be the lone wolf on this one, I still feel that I might not vote in favor of this motion. It's not because, and what I don't like about the fact I'm voting that way is that I'm worried that now it looks like I'm saying that our results aren't, that I don't support our results. I do support our results. Again, I'm very proud that our high school graduation rates keep trending upwards, and incredibly proud that we outperformed the province on our PETs, and that in so many measures, we demonstrate over and over again that a CBE education is an excellent education. I'm just worried that we're burying that good news story with this amendment.
Trustees for second round of debate. Trustee Dennis, go ahead.
Happy to jump in here. So I'm not completely opposite in thinking to my neighbor to my left here. So I will support the motion, and obviously part of the motion is the exception, so I'm saying that I'm also agreeing with that. But I'm very encouraged. I would say I'm very encouraged in terms of the progress that we are making with our students who self-identify as Indigenous. We have modeled significant commitment to the success for this group of students with the investment that we make with the holistic lifelong learning framework and the amazing work that's been done with that. And also when I look at and will admittedly, right, our results are below the provincial results, but when I look at how we are tracking, we are narrowing gaps. And when I look at the achievement, improvement, and overall measure evaluations, we are tracking parallel to the province. And so I am greatly encouraged by the work that is happening with this group of students, and I am optimistic that we will, in not too short of order, I guess, we will see a change in what this exception looks like. And so, although I maybe haven't quite arrived to where Trustee Vukadinovic is, I am on the tipping point. So I just want to say that I will support the motion with the exception, because I think what it signals is that we're just not taking our foot off the gas. We demonstrate that day in and day out, and I think the motion also demonstrates that this continues to be a priority for the board.
Trustees for round two. Trustee Bolger, go ahead.
Thank you. In speaking in support of reasonable progress and in support of the motion, which as stated includes the exception, I really appreciated the professional learning and the structures and processes that are outlined throughout this report. So they're impressive, reflective, well thought out, and at many times build upon structures that are already in place, such as using our frameworks in our schools and in the school development plans. The addition of subject area specialists will also further support our work and goals for improvement in our schools. So I appreciate that all of these commitments to professional development and learning, which will support teaching and learning in the CBE, are exciting to look forward to.
Any other trustees for round two? I will enter for round two. Just want to say that this report is really well laid out. And I just want to focus in a little bit on understanding for everybody as they go through the report, the graduation rates, which are ever increasing. I think it shows the story a little bit better, and I would love to have a discussion with my colleagues and with administration to be highlighting or showing the grade 10 cohort that moves through on that diagonal rather than reading up and down. I know our board's goal is to enable each student to complete high school, so with that focus, looking at how they're increasing graduation rates from the 3-year, 4-year, 5-year on that diagonal, I'd love to have that discussion. Just to lay it out very clear going forward. Trustee Close, will you finish debate?
I've really appreciated the debate that's been brought forward, and expectations have been met as far as the analysis and how our different brains work. One thing I'll say is I think next year I could definitely support no exceptions. So I think we are at a point, like a pivot point, Trustee Vukandinovich, but I'm going to encourage you to support the motion so that we can all support the amazing success that students have within CBE. One of the struggles I have when I talk about our results too is, and I think this is probably noticeable even in my opening, that I do have a personal disconnect with some of the policy values that we have related to even our expected graduate profile or the indicators of success. And so I struggle with talking about how great things are at CBE, and I look for, and I know they are, but the data, the way it's presented, doesn't quite work for me, and the storytelling that I need around what, that we have kids that are successfully transitioning, that we have children that are starting kindergarten, that we have students attending school. I think those are all tremendous indicators. So I think, just to conclude, incredibly difficult, challenging past couple of years. Chair Hack, you spoke about that eloquently around what families are experiencing, and yet CBE is still progressing forward. So that is such a great news story, and I hope we can all support that, even with the exception. Because the progress is being made even with our students who self-identify as Indigenous. There's no question in my mind. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful comments.
Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the motion? Trustee Downey? Thanks, I see your
In
hand.
favor.
Thank you. That is Trustee May, Trustee Close, Trustee Bolger, Trustee Dennis, Trustee Downey, and Trustee Hack. Those opposed? Trustee Vukandinovich? That is carried. Next on our agenda is item 8.2, proposed amendments to the governance policies, operational expectations 5, financial planning and operational expectations 8, communicating and engaging with the public. The Board of Trustees gave first reading to the proposed amendments to OE5 and OE8 on October 25th, 2022, and received the report from Chief Superintendent on the impact of proposed changes on January 31st, 2023. The report is now before the Board to consider final approval of the proposed amendments. Trustees, any questions or comments on the report? Is there a trustee who wishes to bring forward a motion regarding this report? Trustee May.
That the Board of Trustees give second reading and thereby final approval to the amendments of Operational Expectations 5, Financial Planning, and Operational Expectations 8, Communicating and Engaging with the Public, provided in Attachment 1 and 2 to this report.
Do you trustees have any questions about the motion? The motion on the floor is that the Board of Trustees give second reading and thereby final approval to the amendments of Operational Expectations 5, Financial Planning, and Operational Expectations 8, Communicating and Engaging with the Public, provided in Attachments 1 and 2 to this report. Trustee May, would you please open debate?
So as Chair Hack stated, the first reading was given in October, and our impact statement from the Chief has been received. So just as a reminder, a highlight to the change of OE5 financial planning is found in section 5.6B, and so it removes the requirement that operating reserves be at 3% of operating expenses, and so this change now just aligns with Alberta Education Funding Manual. And then for OE8, communicating with the public, there's now an addition of post-secondary institutions within the definition of community. So this aligns with Section 33 of the Education Act, and as we can see in other reports, especially in high school, our admin does work very well and very closely with post-secondary, and will continue to do so. So I would encourage my fellow trustees to vote in favor.
Thank you. Trustees wishing to enter round one of debate. Trustee Vukadinovich, go ahead.
I support this motion. I think it's very sensible. The one regarding reserve levels will help us to be more flexible in responding to changing needs, and the one regarding post-secondary education institutions, it's something we already do. We already work closely with post-secondary education institutions, and this just makes it more explicit. So happy to support.
Trustees for round one. We'll go to round two. Any trustees wishing to enter or re-enter for round two? Trustee May, do you wish to add anything further to close debate?
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
I'll call the question. Those in favor of the motion? Trustee Downey, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you so much. That is carried unanimously. That brings us to the consent agenda of our meeting. All items not removed from the consent agenda will be deemed to be approved with the agenda. That brings us to the conclusion of the public portion of the agenda. The board has 3 labor, 4 land, 4 legal, and 3 strategic planning matters to deal with in private. I'd like to thank all of you who joined us for this meeting. Our next public board meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 7th, 2023.